This is really the end of a journey, but a new one will be starting, and that's the one we've wanted to partake in, which is basically to make America great again.
Are you confident you're going to win?
My grandmother didn't even graduate from high school, the grandmother who raised me, and now here I am, getting to hang out with you fine people on a Monday morning, ask you to make me the next Vice President of the United States. That's a great testament to our country.
Here's my only purpose in even being here today. Get out and vote. You know that.
It is the race to the finish line. Just 29 hours now until the first set of polls close, and both candidates are squeezing in their last stops in a state that could decide the election. Former President Trump and Vice President Harris zeroing in on Pennsylvania for the last day of the campaign. Well, I'm John Roberts. I guess it's good to end it in the place where democracy all started, right?
I was going to say, it may be just the beginning. Hello and welcome, everybody. I'm Sandra Smith. This is America Reports. The two nominees have their eyes on the prize. Pennsylvania's 19 electoral votes, a crucial state in the path to 270. Trump and Harris set to hold a combined 5 rallies in the state in the final hours before the election.
We have got an all-star lineup of guests with key analysis throughout the next 2 hours.
And our team of reporters are on the ground across the country in swing states that could decide who wins the White House.
We kick everything off with our national correspondent, Brian Yedis. He is live in Allentown, Pennsylvania, where Harris is going to campaign later on today. I can hear the Billy Joel music already, Brian.
John, good afternoon. Vice President Kamala Harris is the entire goal election eve is to drive out the vote here in Pennsylvania. This is being treated as a must win. And like I said, she will be spending her entire day here. She left Michigan. She put a thumbs up in the air when she was asked how she was feeling. She is on her way here to Pennsylvania. She is starting her day in Scranton. That is where President Biden is obviously from. She'll be door knocking there. She'll then head over here to Allentown for a rally, and from Allentown she'll head to Reading for an event with AOC and Pennsylvania's Governor Josh Shapiro, and then she rounds it all up with 2 major concerts in Pittsburgh and in Philadelphia, starring Lady Gaga, Ricky Martin, and Oprah. Now look, yesterday she said her closing message at a rally in Michigan, and notably she did not mention former President Trump by name for the first time at a rally since she became the Democratic nominee.
We have the momentum because our campaign is tapping into the ambitions, the aspirations, and the dreams of the American people. Because we are optimistic and excited about what we can do together.
Now, half of her stops here in Pennsylvania are in Pennsylvania's Latino 222 corridor. This is an area including Allentown and Reading. They are majority Latino cities, and she is trying to drive up voter turnout in these particular areas today. And I gotta say, the Democrats in the Harris campaign continue to point to the comments made by the comic at that MSG rally more than a week ago, calling Puerto Rico an island of garbage. The mayor here of Allentown, again, a majority Latino and Puerto Rican population here, says that those comments have led directly to a more energized base here, and he thinks it'll make a difference.
It is a big deal, particularly to Puerto Ricans, and an apology would have gone a long way. Their mind starts to wander to what that campaign thinks about the place that they're from. Maybe that's from El Salvador or Venezuela or Dominican Republic or Mexico. And it makes a person think twice about how they're viewed by the campaign.
Now, Democrats desperately need a large voter turnout on Election Day, particularly when you look at the mail ballot advantage here in Pennsylvania has shrunk from more than 1 million in 2020 to over 400,000. That means that 75% of the votes expected here in Pennsylvania, John, should be coming tomorrow on Election Day, which is why she is hitting this Commonwealth the entire day trying to drive out the vote in Democratic cities like Philadelphia, Allentown, and Pittsburgh. John?
Yeah, there are a lot of people who are saying that this entire race could come down to how many votes the Democrats can turn out in Philadelphia. We will see. Brian Yedis for us. Brian, thank you.
Meanwhile, former President Trump crisscrossing key battleground states on the eve of this election. He is en route to Pennsylvania after rallying supporters in North Carolina. Senior national correspondent Aisha Hasni is in Raleigh for us. Aisha, what was his closing message to voters there?
The closing message, Sandra, is nothing but get out and vote. Bring that red wave on Election Day. That is what counts the most now in the next 24 to 48 hours. The former president, I'm told, is feeling good. He's feeling strong on this election eve. And he just told a big crowd here in North Carolina that this is his race to lose, and they've got to close this thing.
Hopefully, everything will work out well. We're way leading. All we have to do is close it out. We have to close it out. If we get our vote, there's nothing they can do. This is one of those deals. If we get our vote, we're leading every swing state, which is unheard of for the Republican Party.
Sandra, just like you said, Trump is headed to Pennsylvania next, a big battleground for him, 2 stops there. And that is actually where the campaign is tracking some pretty low urban and female early voter turnout compared to 2020. They're flagging that because they believe that's going to hurt Vice President Kamala Harris. Then it's off to Michigan, where he will close out the 2024 campaign in Grand Rapids. The campaign tells me they are very pleased with the early vote leads in key states like Arizona, Nevada, and right here in North Carolina. They're expecting that massive wave of traditional voters, and they say if those GOP voters that only vote on Election Day, the ones that they are expecting to vote tomorrow, if they turn out in the numbers they're expecting, then the former president has clinched this thing. Back to you.
All right, Aisha in Raleigh for us. Aisha, thank you. John?
Oh, I remember 2016 being in Grand Rapids about 1 o'clock in the morning. Let's bring in New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. She is the chairwoman of the House Republican Conference. Congresswoman, I want to hit you with some data because we love data around here. Let's talk about the gender gap. New York Times Siena poll finds Harris leading Trump among women by 12 points. He leads her among men by 14 for a total gender gap of 26 points. Here's what we know so far from the early and absentee voting. Women outpacing men 53.3% to 44.2%. Trump says he's doing better among women than Kamala Harris is among men, but there's that substantial gender gap. He's got to get a lot of women out to the polls tomorrow for day of voting. How is he going to do it?
Well, first of all, the data points to that President Trump is doing better with women than Kamala Harris is doing with men. And what's really important is that under President Trump, today's Republican Party has grown tremendously. Look at the historic support among African-American voters. Look at the historic support among Latino voters, working class voters, union voters. These are voters that are part of demographic groups that previously the Democrat Party thought they were entitled to. President Trump has earned their support. And I believe that you're going to see working class women turn out in support of President Trump because of his effective policies. Women under President Trump's economy, there was more women in the workforce than ever before. We had the highest wage and salary increase ever in our nation's history under President Trump. And look at what's happened under Kamala Harris. The inflation crisis, the border crisis, those are top of the mind for women and men voters across the country.
Congresswoman Sandra here, thanks for coming on with us. A lot will be said about 48 hours from now from Trump's closing arguments with voters and whether or not he was reaching out to those undecided voters in these final hours. I wonder if there was a better use of Nikki Haley, and you can answer that question in a moment. I'll put this up on the screen. This is from the Wall Street Journal. She says Trump isn't perfect, but he's the better choice. This is from Sunday's edition. I agree with Mr. Trump that America should be strong, far stronger than we are today, she writes. When he was president, Russia didn't invade another country. Iran was on its heels, trying to receive serious pushback for the first time in decades, and our southern border was more secure. The world is unsafe under Biden-Harris, and we shouldn't expect that to change under a Harris administration. So perhaps was there a better use of her in these final days? Your thoughts?
Look, Nikki Haley wrote the op-ed about why she's supporting President Trump. And the reality is you have women crisscrossing the country, whether it's Tulsi Gabbard, previously a registered Democrat, female member of Congress, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, myself, Kristi Noem. You have senior women who have run his campaign like Susie Wiles, Kellyanne Conway did in 2016. You have senior level people around President Trump. And what I think has been a disgrace in the final chapter is you had Kamala Harris's top ally, Mark Cuban, smear the women around President Trump, saying he does not surrender surround himself with smart, strong, intelligent women. The reality is there are smart, intelligent, strong women across this country who are not only campaigning with President Trump at the most senior levels, but that are voting for him. So, certainly we can talk about that after the election cycle, but the reality is you have women crisscrossing this country working to get out the vote for President Trump. And the most important message I want to give to voters today is get out and vote. It's we the people that will determine the outcome of this election. We the people need to save America and vote Trump tomorrow.
Congresswoman, we want to come here to the touchscreen because we want to take on the balance of power in the House. And I know that this is something that's very important to you. Republicans projected to get 208 seats, Democrats 205. That leaves 22 as the toss-up. We want to go here to the big map outside. I'm going to have to use the presidential races here. Let's use this path to 270 to talk about some of the races that are very, very important here. Alaska. I know that Richard Hudson, who's the NRCC chair, says they think they can flip a seat here. He also thinks that in North Carolina, they could pick up 4 seats. Maine, they can flip Maine number 2. California, there's 5 close races. There's 3 in New York, including New York 17 with Mike Lawler. The balance of power here in the House could come down to New York and California, which are typically thought of just as Democratic strongholds, but some important Republican seats there. How do you think the night is going to go?
So I think President Trump is going to have tremendous coattails, and House Republicans are going to overperform just like we did in 2016 and 2020, the last 2 times that President Trump was on the ballot. You point out a really important trend in that both California and New York are traditionally viewed as blue states. But people are experiencing the double whammy of failed policies of Kamala Harris with state policies that are horrific by Democrat governors. That's why you saw flipped seats in New York. We flipped 5 seats in the midterms. And in every single district in New York and every swing district across the country, Kamala Harris is underperforming Joe Biden's 2020 numbers. And I'll give you an example. If you look at one of the top targeted seats in New York, a district that Joe Biden won by 15 points, President Trump is ahead by 2 points today. That is a 17-point swing. So we are very optimistic that so goes the presidency, will go the House, and President Trump is the most effective candidate ever in modern history of either party in turning out votes. So I believe that we will pick up seats this election cycle. Alaska, Maine, we're going to hold the New York seats. We pick up 4 in North Carolina, as well as seats in Michigan, Texas, and elsewhere.
All right, so there's the balance of power again. 218 needed for the majority. Republicans 10 away with 22 toss-up seats. We will see how it goes. It's going to be a nail-biter. Congresswoman, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman.
Thank you.
All right. Both presidential candidates spending election eve in Pennsylvania. So what will they have to say to those undecided voters in the potential tipping point state?
Plus, we're tracking the different ways the candidates could reach those coveted 270 electoral votes. Guy Benson here to help break down the potential paths to victory.
You hear that Republicans' growth in registration has been much greater in key places than the Democrats. You would think that was really a telltale sign. And now what we're hearing is, also high early vote turnout by Republicans, much higher than before.
Electoral votes across 7 states appear to be in play right now. Let's take a spin on the touchscreen. Guy Benson is here, Fox News contributor and host of Fox Radio's The Guy Benson Show. Super pumped for this because you're going to take us through a couple key scenarios. As we have been pointing out right now, when you look at these battlegrounds, you can make the case that the easiest pathway to victory, Guy, for example, for Kamala Harris would be to win the blue wall, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. With Nebraska 2, that puts her right at 270. Okay, if you were to look at a very easy pathway to victory for Donald Trump, if he was to secure, obviously, Pennsylvania would be huge. It would just take North Carolina and Georgia after that to get him to 270.
Right, and all these others at that point would be irrelevant. He'd already be at 270 with just those 3.
Exactly.
But to your previous point, if you look at Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, I know we keep talking about these blue states, the blue wall. That is by far her easiest path. She just has to replicate Democrats' success almost every election, every presidential election dating back for decades, with the big exception of 2016, by securing those 3. And by the way,
let's get you on the map here.
Sure.
I mean, let's play around with a couple scenarios, because this is what everybody's going to be watching on election night, right?
So if we hit, all right, so let's just say she does all 3 of those.
Okay,
gets the blue wall. She's still 1 short, but I think Nebraska 2.
Right,
the polling looks pretty good. She's president, if that happens.
Okay.
Now, here's one thing that I'll point out, though.
Okay.
You might say, well, what if those all get broken up? What if Trump picks off one of them or 2 of them, or what have you?
R.
That's possible, except In every election since 1988, since I was 3 years old, those 3 states are a package deal. They always fall the same way. Okay. Now, that doesn't guarantee that the same thing will happen tomorrow, but it's just something to keep in mind. Now, let's just pretend for the moment that Trump does well in the Sun Belt. There's some polling that suggests that he will. Let's say he hangs on to North Carolina, wins back Georgia. I think he's looking pretty solid in Arizona. That's what the polling shows. And let's just give him Nevada, too, although that's, I think, maybe less relevant. Republicans seem to be overperforming there. We'll see. He's at 268, right? It is
real quickly, Guy, in this moment, since we're hours away from Election Day, show Kamala Harris, the vice president, is landing there in Scranton, Pennsylvania. To that point, talking about the pathways to victory, obviously Pennsylvania, it could all come down to Pennsylvania, guys.
I think it probably will, right? It's like, surprise, she's going to Pennsylvania. Guess where Trump's headed right now? Pennsylvania. I think it's this cliche that people in this business keep talking about, but there's a reason why there has been an unbelievable amount of resources and money and time poured into the Keystone State, and it's because it kind of unlocks everything, right? It's really hard. It's not impossible, but if you turn Pennsylvania red, so let's make that red for now. Trump's at 238. He now has an array of possibilities open to him, and if that Pennsylvania is actually shaded in red on election night, he is the odds-on favorite to win the whole thing, because he can just, he can just do boom, boom, then how close are we, 265? Then, I mean, Nevada then gets him.
Puts him over the top.
Or North Carolina gets him.
So let's play around with, like, to your point, let's play around if he does crack the blue wall. Okay, say for example, Trump is able to take Wisconsin.
Sure, right? Which is plausible, absolutely plausible based on very tight polling. One thing I'll note, Sandra, on the polling point, if you look at all the swing states in the last 2 elections, 2016, 2020, the state where the polls have been most wrong is Wisconsin. Trump has overperformed, not by a little bit in Wisconsin compared to his polls. He's overperformed a lot.
So let me show you how this would work. If he breaks the blue wall, cracks the blue wall, takes Wisconsin, for example, he could then go on to win North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona.
Game over.
It's game over.
Even without Pennsylvania.
That's without Pennsylvania. That's without Michigan.
Nevada.
That's without Nevada.
But easier said than done. There's some indications that the rural counties are going just bananas for Trump in Wisconsin. We've seen rurals coming out in huge numbers in a lot of these states. I mean, Nevada, for sure, Georgia as well. But one of these unknowable questions is, with the early vote seeming to have improved for the Republicans up to this point, what does that mean for tomorrow? What Trump and the Republicans absolutely need on Tuesday is big turnout on Election Day itself. They need to win Election Day by a substantial margin to overcome some of the advantages that the Democrats still have in early voting. So that's why the big message from Trump in particular today at these rallies, especially in Pennsylvania, is if you haven't voted already, you have to vote tomorrow.
Yeah, we just heard that from Trump earlier. He's going to be in Reading, Pennsylvania shortly. Kamala Harris on the ground in Scranton. Guy, it's like you do this all the time. Perfecto.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. All right, now this.
We've got to have a huge turnout because, as I told President Trump when I first started this journey a couple of years ago, the most important thing we could give President Trump is a Republican majority, because the first votes you take are to get his cabinet officials through the U.S. Senate so he can govern effectively.
That was Montana Senator Steve Daines with us yesterday on the Republicans' push to try to flip the Senate. We'll talk to Eric Hovde coming up on his mission to turn Wisconsin's blue Senate seat red.
Plus, another seat up for grabs is in Daines' home state. Dan Springer has the latest from Bozeman, Montana for us. Hey, Dan.
Yeah, hi, Sandra. One of the questions in this all-important Senate race here in Montana is how many voters will split their ticket. It could end up deciding which party.
If I didn't talk to the other side and say, how do we work together? When I built companies, I said, let's build a team for what we want to accomplish. We've got a lot of great things we want to accomplish. We're going to get a majority and take the best ideas from everybody, and all of us come together to get something done. So I think people want a big change.
That's Florida Senator Rick Scott, confident that he will hold on to his seat and that Republicans will win back the majority in the Senate. Fox News Power Rankings do give the GOP the edge, due in large part to Montana, where Democratic incumbent Jon Tester is up against Tim Sheehy. Sheehy leads in the latest polls. We've got Fox team coverage. Steve Harrigan is tracking Rick Scott's race in Florida. But first, to our Dan Springer. He's live in Bozeman, Montana. And if you ever wondered why they call it Big Sky Country, just look at that backdrop.
Yeah, John, that's right. Big Sky Country and a big lead for President Trump. And that's important here because President Trump has won twice here by blowouts. He's expected to do the same thing again Tuesday. And if that happens, Democrat incumbent Jon Tester will need about 20% of Trump voters to also vote for him. And to achieve that, Tester has been really trying to paint himself as a centrist who has bucked his party on issues like energy. He voted for the Keystone XL pipeline and immigration. He opposes amnesty for illegals. He also has not publicly endorsed Kamala Harris. But as his opponent, Tim Sheehy, points out, every chance he gets, Tester has voted with his party 94% of the time, including the Green New Deal and against funding for the border fence.
Jon Tester voted to impeach Trump 2 times, not once but twice. Voted against all of his Supreme Court nominees and cabinet nominees. And yet now in an election year, all of a sudden he's touting how close he works with Trump. It's a joke. People are seeing through it, and we're going to beat him on Tuesday.
Montana does have a history of ticket splitting, but as the country has gotten more polarized, so has the Treasure State. During the pandemic, a lot of people moved in, and it's estimated that 2/3 of the new voters are Republican. It was a mixed bag when we asked voters about Montana's independent streak and if it's still strong enough to carry Tester to another improbable victory in this pretty red state.
He's got the flat top haircut going for him, but that's about it. He's just a straight party line Democrat, and Montanans are not.
Montanans are very independent. They don't like to be tied to one party or another.
The other wild card is that there is an independent candidate on the Senate ballot, and the independent candidate in Tester's races have gotten between 2 and 6% of the vote. They, of course, take more from Republicans than Democrats, and so each of Tester's elections have been within that margin of error. So if the independent does really well, it could bode well for Tester as well. Back to you, John.
All right, Dan Springer for us, the beautiful backdrop of Bozeman, Montana. It's gorgeous there, but clearly it's also freezing cold, Dan. Thank you so much. Sandra?
All right, Florida Senate race also being closely watched. Republican incumbent Rick Scott not sparing any expense and pouring tens of millions of his own money into his reelection campaign against the Democrat in this race. Senior correspondent Steve Harrigan is live in Naples, Florida. Wow, what a contrasting weather view we're having right now. So, Steve, you had the chance to speak with the senator. What exactly did he tell you?
It's interesting, Sandra. Rick Scott said in every major race he's won, they told him he was going to lose beforehand. He said that's very different this time, and in part because of early voting. 8 million Floridians have already voted out of 13 million. That's about 57%. And Rick Scott says is even in Democratic stronghold areas like Miami-Dade and South Florida, Republicans are outperforming Democrats. Here's the senator.
Republicans have way outpaced Democrats so far. Typically, Republicans come out on Election Day, and that's how we win. But there's so much energy. I've been traveling the state today. I'll be in Okeechobee, DeSoto County, Hendry County, and here. And I need to say there's going to be so much energy. People want change. They know what's on the ballot.
Now, there's 2 ballot initiatives which could make things a little bit interesting come election night. One is an abortion ban. Florida has a strict one, just 6 weeks. There's an amendment to change that to roughly 24 weeks. The second would be recreational marijuana, legalizing it. Those 2 initiatives need 60% to win on the ballot. Sandra, back to you.
All right, Steve Harrigan on that for us. Wow. I mean, if we didn't have enough to watch on this election day coming up, it's going to be an interesting one, John.
I do love the contrast, though, in geography and weather.
Wow.
You got Dan Springer in front of these majestic mountains
Beautiful.
covered in snow, where clearly it's cold because it was snowing there and everybody's wearing hats.
And although I said when we saw that beautiful shot, why don't we all live there? You say, because it's cold.
Because it's cold. And then you see Harrigan on the flat land of Florida, but it's nice and warm.
Look
there.
at that shot.
Yeah,
Wow.
Look at that.
Stunning.
That's unbelievable.
All right.
All right. If you want a cold place, go there in February. Yeah. Battleground states are also battlegrounds for lawsuits. What Republicans in Georgia are accusing some counties of doing with early voting ballots. Fox News legal editor Carrie Urban reacts. Coming up next.
All right. Plus, former President Trump and Vice President Harris both hitting battleground Pennsylvania today. Harris Walls campaign co-chair Senator Chris Coons is coming up on what Harris needs to do to lock down the must-win state.
I think he did a lot of great things for the economy and internationally. I think he's well liked. But internally, I think there is too much chaos.
People just want a safe country and they know Trump will. I feel like Trump will do it. I feel like Trump will do it.
Democrat-heavy counties to continue accepting ballots after the official early voting period ended. And that is just one example. Carrie Urban is our Fox News legal editor. She will get no sleep because things are changing by the hour here. First in Georgia, and we have a list of the counties that are named in this election lawsuit, deep blue counties over mail-in ballots delivered over the weekend. Where's this heading next?
So the RNC is going to appeal this decision. They're very disappointed that the court sided with the state here. And here what happened was there was an early voting deadline, which was Friday evening. And then these counties decided to basically extend hours through the weekend and allow people to drop off in person their mail-in ballots. The RNC said, hey, look, you're changing rules at the 11th hour. What do you mean? Early voting's over. And the state said, well, look, two things. One, we've always allowed people to hand in their mail-in ballots. They call it over the counter, meaning in person. And two, counties have discretion to keep their offices open longer if they'd like to. Now, the one little twist here, though, was after this happened, the RNC says, well, we're going to appeal this decision because it's so, 11th hour and it was not scheduled. The director of elections in Fulton County was not going to allow any poll observers to come in and watch what was happening this past weekend. And the Secretary of State got involved and they quickly changed course. But the rationale was, well, these aren't polling places, so we're not going to have observers. But it's like, well, wait a second. If you're going to turn it into that, then you've got to have the observers in. So they changed course a few hours later, and the RNC did tout that as a win. And those were observers, by the way, for both sides.
Right. Here's what the Georgia GOP chair Josh McCoon said about it. He said the Georgia Republican Party, in conjunction with the RNC, have filed suit in federal court to halt the counting of these ballots. At a minimum, we want to sequester the ballots that were submitted without proper oversight of our election observers. In the past, courts haven't been particularly receptive to those arguments. And again, in the overall, this isn't early voting that was extended. This is extended deadline to hand in mail-in
ballots. Right. That's right. And this is a remedy that I've seen the RNC, that this is what they keep asking for. And you can ask for whatever you want. Doesn't mean the court's going to give it to you. But they keep saying, look, even if you don't agree with this on X issue, whether it's a signature, a date, an envelope, can you at least set them aside so we can take a look at them as this litigation continues?
And I'll bet the judge says no.
It hasn't gone well yet, that remedy request.
All right, so this lawsuit that's fighting Elon Musk $1 million giveaways, where does that stand right now?
So
the Philadelphia DA is suing.
Yeah, so they had a hearing in that this morning. I've been reading the notes from our producers. Seems a bit contentious. Larry Krasner, who I'll get to in a minute, is insisting that Elon Musk is running a lottery. Lotteries are governed by state law, therefore, Pennsylvania law should be involved. Musk is saying, no, we're not. We're just asking people who, as long as you're registered to vote, you can sign this petition. And they're making an argument that this person becomes effectively a contractor because they become a spokesperson for this whole petition drive. Interesting legal argument, but the big irony here is that it's Larry Krasner who's suing Elon Musk. Larry Krasner, who does not care about crime in Philadelphia, was one of the first self-described progressive, prosecutors, lowered the limit shoplifting. So if you shoplift under $500, it's not even a crime anymore. Things like this, got rid of bail for all kinds of stuff. And he's going after Elon's constitutional petitions here.
Yeah, he doesn't care about crime until it involves the richest man in the world giving away $1 million.
For Donald Trump.
Which likely isn't even a crime.
Right. And for Donald Trump.
But the reason why this is such a big deal, though, is because voter registration, you have to be a registered voter to participate. That could mean that people will register so that they can play. And if it's coming from Elon Musk, the banking is that they're going to be registering Republican. in the Philadelphia area, which could decide the entire election.
Right, and the petition specifically is a pledge to support the First and Second Amendments. And we know who typically are big Second Amendment fans, right?
Exactly.
All right, so what do you think is going to bubble up the most in the coming hours before we hit Election Day here?
Well, I think the situation in Arizona is pretty interesting. A court ordered the Secretary of State there to release 218,000 voters who may have registered who are not citizens. It's unclear. There was a computer glitch, so we don't know if, in fact, they were citizens or not. The Secretary of State has insisted they don't have the whole list. They're blaming other agencies. So what will happen is that list will then go to various counties in Arizona. Then they're going to decide. They'll do their own matching if they want to. It'll go to the Arizona legislature, and they'll see, all these people on this list, when they registered, were they in fact citizens or not, which is required, of course.
I mean, but the crux in that case is that the number of people who registered without proof of citizenship doubled between 2020 and 2024. So rather than having 109,000 people, you got 218,000 people now who may or may not be citizens who are on the voter rolls.
Yeah, that's why I think it's something to watch. I don't know how much they can get done between now and tomorrow, but certainly an interesting situation to keep an eye on.
Busy few
Get some sleep tonight.
Thank you.
It may be the last time.
Thank you
so much, Carrie. All right.
Thank you.
It's a fight to the finish in battleground states. James Freeman of the Wall Street Journal will be at the touchscreen for a look at what he is keeping a close eye on.
All right. Plus, we've heard a lot of talk on the campaign trail from Vice President Harris, but has any of it clarified her positions on some of these key policies?
Theo cơ sở dấu sợi thừa cắt bỏ sợi thừa bằng kéo. Song tay thứ nhất. Móc tay thứ hai. 7 mũi xích. Quay lại móc 5 mũi kép. Mũi kép thứ tư. Hàng 5 mũi kép thứ. Hàng thứ hai. Một mũi giảm. Một mũi kép. Một mũi giảm. Cắt bỏ sợi thừa. Móc tất cả các mũi kép trụm đầu. Tiếp theo cắt sợi. Cứ bảo dựa thừa. Sâu tay thứ hai. Sử dụng sợi màu hồng nhạt tạo vòng tròn pháp thuật. Hàng đầu tiên, móc 11 mũi nửa kép vào vòng tròn pháp thuật. Mũi nửa kép thứ tư,